Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyervip.com, on Roku, Dwyer Boxing, and Sports News. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Well, more beer for us. The Quigg by KO, part of the hedge, delivered and paid off at a plus 250. In other words, it paid off at a 2.5 to 1. Let's do the math. Let's re-examine this hedge. Let's do forensics on it. I'm going to use round numbers so they equal 100 so we can track the rate of return here, right? If you place $50 on Kiko Martinez to win the fight at plus 300 and $50 on Scott Quigg by KO, in other words, if you did the hedge recommended in the pre-fight video, right, understand the Scott Quigg by KO would have netted you 50 times 2.5, right, $125 minus the 50 that you would have bet on Kiko Martinez simply to win. So understand, on a $100 outlay, you would have netted $75, right? 75% rate of return. Understand, with the hedge recommended in the pre-fight video, you actually did better on this fight than you would have done simply taking Scott Quigg to win the fight. Now let's talk about the fight, because I understand in the press they're going to say biggest win of Scott Quigg's career. No doubt you're picking up the paper this morning, or you're on a website this morning, and you're reading about the brilliance of Scott Quigg. Let's say this. Here, I'm not here to pick on any fighter. We're just here to talk styles so we can forecast fights and beat the casino. In my opinion, the first round of this fight is an unmitigated disaster for Scott Quigg. It highlights all of the problems in Scott Quigg's game. We know Scott Quigg's a puncher, no question about it. We know he's a great athlete, no question about it. Is he a great fighter? Now, I want to invite everyone here to Google this fight on YouTube, because the video's up, and it's a short enough video where we can just analyze the fight together. And it'll only take about 5 minutes, quite frankly, in real time, right? Because the first round is 3 minutes, and then the second round, Scott Quigg is able to land an uppercut that sets up 2 knockdowns. The fight gets stopped. But let's go back to the first round. You have a shorter man, Kiko Martinez, on his front foot, right? He truly believes that Scott Quigg is not as strong as him and doesn't have a back foot game. So he's hyper-aggressive in that first round. Now, you're Scott Quigg. You're the taller man. Take a look at the film. You're going to see that Scott Quigg gives up height, right? He's bent over, folks. You wouldn't even guess he's the taller man. He gives up his height. He's not leveraging his height like, let's say, a Vladimir Klitschko. More troubling is the fact that Quigg, a puncher, doesn't like to stay in the pocket. Was this Scott Quigg, or was this Erislandy Lara? Right? He's moving away from Kiko Martinez. Right? He doesn't have the gift of being able to just stand his ground like a Floyd Mayweather, have the other guy walk into his shoulder, and then operate from the pocket. That's not who he is. He abandons the pocket. Let me say this too. He doesn't have the timing, and this is damning, against a guy who's constantly coming forward. He doesn't have the timing to shoot a jab. Right? He's not Vladimir Klitschko. You don't see a lot of jabs from Scott Quigg in that first round. Just look at the tape. You have effective jabs from Kiko Martinez. You don't have effective jabs from Scott Quigg. Right? Let me say this too. 3 minutes of boxing. Think about this. Shorter man is coming forward relentlessly. Scott Quigg doesn't clinch him. There are no clinches in the first round. Right? None. Could you imagine how Kell Brook versus Shawn Porter would have turned out if Kell Brook couldn't clinch Shawn Porter? If Kell Brook just decided to abandon the pocket and move backwards for 12 rounds, how would that fight have looked? Right? Klitschko, Alexander Povetkin. Clinching's a big part of that fight. You need to find a way to punish the other guy for his hyper-aggressiveness. Here in the first round against an opponent who's known to be front foot heavy, Scott Quigg's game plan didn't include one clinch. Think about it. Perhaps the most damning thing to me are Scott Quigg's feet. Scott Quigg, like Adrian Broner, likes to have his feet far apart because it gives him more power when he throws his punches. Right? Scott Quigg's real calling card is his power. Right? Power and stamina. We'll link them together, and body punching. I'll give him that. Right? But here he's fighting a shorter guy. He can't quite get to the body. He's moving out of the pocket. But he's not blessed with great timing where he can just suddenly stop, pivot, and throw punches. He needs that left foot far in front of that right foot. Right? He needs it. Now, there's an opening here for savvy opponents. Right? Someone's going to look at the film and they're going to be able to determine just off Quigg's feet when he'll be able to throw about 70% of his punches. They'll be able to figure that out. Let me say this too. The punch that starts to end the fight in the second round is an uppercut. Now, Kiko Martinez curiously has his hands like this. Right? He's moving forward. He has his hands like this. So his chin is somewhat open. An opponent can actually time it and can hit him on the way in. Because understand, Quigg needed the room. Quigg's only chance against Kiko Martinez was to hit him on the way in. Because Quigg's punches aren't short enough to hit a guy who's already in the pocket, who's already up on him. Now, if you watch Evander Holyfield films, look at Holyfield against Mike Tyson, you're going to notice that Holyfield has what I call an arm bar. In other words, one hand's like this. The purpose is to prevent the other guy from hitting you with uppercuts. And Mike Tyson had a great uppercut. You'll notice guys like Archie Moore, George Foreman, right? Archie Moore, believe it or not, used to be in George Foreman's corner, right? Boxing Hall of Famers, one training the other, right? Research George Foreman's past, you're going to find out too that George Foreman used to train with heavyweight champion Sonny Liston, right? Former heavyweight champion at the time. Well, Archie Moore and George Foreman actually fight like this at times. Right? The idea is, as they are close to you getting inside, you have to get through this to hit him with an uppercut. Now, all I'm saying is, if Kiko Martinez could have just been a little bit more adaptive, and instead of fighting like this, leaving himself open to the uppercut that starts the end of the fight in the second round, if he could have just had an arm bar at a minimum, right, had a hand like this, or fought like this, knowing that Quigg's big weapon is a right hand, if he could have just tilted himself a little bit like this as he comes in, right, Quigg would have not had a lot to hit with that right hand, and Quigg would have had a hard time landing the uppercut that ended the fight. My point is, with a long enough training camp, a guy who makes adjustments can prepare to be front foot heavy against Scott Quigg, and can also prepare himself to protect himself from Quigg's uppercut. If he's looking at Quigg's feet and he knows Quigg can only throw big power shots when his feet are far apart, right? And if he knows that on the way in, Quigg's not blessed with timing, right? Throwing a jab involves a lot of good timing. And it involves confidence in knowing that you can throw the jab without being countered. If the opponent knows that on the way in, he's not going to get hit with a Larry Holmes jab, right? He's not going to be hit with the Vladimir Klitschko jab, then in my opinion, you're going to have more of the first round. A round I thought Quigg clearly loses. 10-9. Understand, if the fight progresses and if that first round had duplicated itself repeatedly, it would be obvious that Quigg had no real plan. This is after a training camp. Had no real plan on how to stop Kiko Martinez as he came forward, throwing a lot of punches. Right? As I said, just count the clinches in the first round. I don't believe there are any. Right? There are none. Right? Count Quigg's jabs in the first round. Ask yourself, how many times against a smaller man, right, fighting before Quigg's own fans, does Quigg just stand up in the middle of the ring and say, Kiko, I'm not backing up. If you're going to come forward and if you're going to throw volume, I'm going to stay in the pocket and I'm going to counter you. Does that happen? Right? So, make no mistake. I know I'm talking here about an unbeaten champion. Right? Look closely at the unbeaten record. It's unbeaten. There were a couple of draws on Scott Quigg's record. I would encourage you to go back to those fights. Scott Quigg, while being an unbeaten champion, is still learning the nuances of the sport. Right? Folks shouldn't confuse him, and I'm serious when I say this, with a Guillermo Rigondeaux. They really shouldn't. Right? You know, also one wonders if he's in against a hyper-aggressive opponent. Let's say an Abner Maris, someone who's going to come forward, Leo Santa Cruz, someone who's going to come forward, continually crowd his space, throw a lot of punches. Can you beat Santa Cruz by abandoning the pocket? Can you? Can you beat Abner Maris by abandoning the pocket? Moving backwards, clumsily, trying to then set your feet, throw big shots? I think it's an open question. Right? So I applaud Scott Quigg. He clearly won the fight. He got the KO. Right? You know what? More beer for us. He put some money in my bank account. I have no qualms with Scott Quigg. I enjoy watching him fight. I believe his punching power is underrated. Right? But let's just say at this stage of his career, he's more of an athlete with a big punch than he is a polished fighter. He's still learning the sport. And there's some other lions in the forest out there who are a bit more polished than him. Could you imagine fighting Guillermo Rigondeaux without a jab to really hurt him? You think you're going to be able to hit Guillermo Rigondeaux with uppercuts? We'll see what happens. That's how I see the fight. Let me hear from you. Leave your comments for me here in the comment section to this video. Let me say this too, and I thought this was interesting. Even the odds makers were a bit skeptical on Quigg. I know Quigg says he doesn't get enough credit. How could a guy with this punch, with this record, fighting before his own hometown fans, have the Scott Quigg by KO prop as high as it was? A plus 250. Think about that. Anyway, let me hear from you. I hope you leave your comments in the comment section to this video. Thanks for stopping by.